There is a moment, quiet, unremarkable, easy to miss, where a conversation that began about you slowly, imperceptibly, stops being about you at all. You don't notice it happening. There is no alarm, no sudden shift in tone, no visible sign that anything has changed. You simply find yourself, minutes later, talking about something entirely different, feeling something entirely different, and somehow defending a position you never intended to take. This is not coincidence. This is not the natural drift of conversation. This is silent redirection, one of the most sophisticated and psychologically devastating tools a manipulator can wield, precisely because it leaves no fingerprints. Most people spend their entire lives never learning its name, never identifying its pattern, and never realizing how often it has already been used against them. And that invisibility is exactly what makes it so powerful. Think about the last time you entered a conversation with a clear intention, perhaps to address a problem, set a boundary, or ask a difficult question, and somehow left without doing any of it. Think about how natural it felt, how the conversation seemed to flow, how you even convinced yourself that maybe your original concern wasn't that important after all. That feeling of voluntary retreat, that quiet abandonment of your own agenda, is rarely accidental when a skilled manipulator is involved. The human mind, for all its extraordinary complexity, has one profound vulnerability. It follows attention. Wherever your focus goes, your emotional energy follows. Wherever your emotional energy flows, your decisions follow. Manipulators understand this at an almost instinctive level. They know that they do not need to overpower your mind. They simply need to redirect it. Like a river that can be guided by the gentlest shift in the landscape, your thoughts can be steered by the smallest, most carefully placed conversational move. A question asked at the right moment. A feeling introduced at the right emotional temperature. A new topic introduced just as you were about to arrive at a conclusion they didn't want you to reach. Psychology tells us that the conscious mind processes roughly 40 to 50 bits of information per second, while the subconscious processes nearly 11 million. What this means in practice is staggering. The vast majority of what influences your thinking, your mood, and your choices happens beneath the surface of your awareness. Manipulators do not target your conscious reasoning. They target the deeper current running beneath it. And until you understand exactly how they do it, you will remain vulnerable to a force you cannot see, cannot name, and therefore cannot stop. Now consider this. A manipulator rarely announces their intention. They do not walk into a conversation carrying a visible agenda. Instead, they arrive wearing the costume of reason, concern, or even affection, and they begin with something small, a subtle pivot in the conversation. Perhaps you raised a concern about feeling ignored, and within 30 seconds, somehow the conversation has shifted to their stress, their struggles, their sacrifices. You find yourself listening, sympathizing, even apologizing, while your original concern evaporates without a single direct dismissal. That is a conversational pivot, and it is the first weapon in the arsenal of silent redirection. It does not silence your point by arguing against it. It simply moves the emotional center of gravity in the room, and your mind, wired for empathy and social harmony, follows automatically. The second technique is topic hijacking, and it operates with even greater subtlety. Where a pivot shifts the emotional focus, a hijack replaces the subject entirely. A skilled manipulator will introduce a new idea, a new problem, or a new emotional trigger at precisely the moment your thinking is about to crystallize into a conclusion or a demand. Psychologists refer to this as cognitive interruption, the deliberate derailment of a thought process before it reaches completion. And here is the disturbing truth about how the human brain responds to interruption. When a thought is broken before it finishes, the mind does not simply pause it and return. More often, it abandons it, reclassifies it as unresolved or unimportant, and redirects its energy toward whatever new stimulus has been introduced. The manipulator knows this. They have learned, through practice or instinct, that they do not need to defeat your argument. They only need to ensure it never fully forms. But perhaps the most psychologically invasive of all three techniques is emotional anchoring. This is where manipulation moves beyond conversation and burrows directly into your nervous system. Emotional anchoring works by associating a specific feeling, guilt, fear, love, obligation, with a particular topic, person, or decision. Over time, every time you approach that subject, the emotion rises before the thought does. You feel something before you have a chance to think clearly. And in that emotional gap, between the feeling and the reasoning, the manipulator has already planted their influence. You reach a conclusion that feels like yours, a decision that feels self-generated, a belief that feels earned, and none of it is. Every layer of this system is designed with one purpose: to make control feel like freedom, and to make your surrender feel like your own choice. So the question that matters most is not whether silent redirection has ever been used against you, because the uncomfortable truth is, it almost certainly has. The question that genuinely changes everything is this: now that you can see it, what do you do? Awareness, in psychology, is not a passive state. It is an active, transformative force. The moment you can name a pattern, you interrupt its power over you. Researchers in cognitive behavioral psychology have long established that metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking, is one of the most powerful tools available to the human mind. When you develop the habit of observing your own mental state during a conversation, you begin to notice things you previously walked past entirely. You notice when a topic shifts too conveniently. You notice when an emotion rises too suddenly. You notice when you're about to say something important and the atmosphere in the room changes just enough to make you hesitate. These are not accidents. These are signals. And learning to read them is the beginning of genuine psychological freedom. In practical terms, reclaiming your mental autonomy begins with one deceptively simple discipline: returning to your original point. When you feel a conversation drifting, pause, not dramatically, not confrontationally, but deliberately. Ask yourself, what did I come here to address? What was the question I walked in with? Then return to it, calmly and with quiet confidence, regardless of what emotional weather has been introduced around it. Manipulators rely on your social conditioning, your desire to be liked, your discomfort with tension, your instinct to smooth things over. The moment you stop prioritizing their comfort over your own clarity, the entire architecture of their influence begins to collapse. Beyond individual conversations, protecting yourself from silent redirection requires building what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify, with precision, what you're feeling and why. The broader and more refined your emotional vocabulary, the harder it becomes for anyone to hijack your inner state without your awareness. People with high emotional granularity are significantly less susceptible to manipulation, not because they feel less, but because they understand what they feel with far greater accuracy. You are not helpless in this. You were never helpless. You are simply unaware. And awareness is something that can always be built, sharpened, and owned. The mind that understands itself is the mind that cannot be silently redirected. That is not just psychological theory. That is your most powerful form of protection. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.